Good morning, everybody. Back with you after a week off, and I hope you had a good 4th of July, Independence Day. Today, I want to continue on with 2 Samuel. We're going to talk about Absalom, David's son by his wife Haggith, was it? So many wives, I've lost track of them all, not mentioning their names. So, with many wives and many children, we see fierce feuds growing up in a home that David presides over. And unfortunately, because of his sin with Bathsheba, I think a lot of his children had irreverence, a disinterest in spiritual things now. They're growing up, they're young adults, and we see the seed of all the wrongdoing there coming to fruition. So in chapter 13 of 2 Samuel, we have the story of Amnon, who is the heir to the throne, and his half-sister Tamar. He has an infatuation for her. And we have the whole concept that unmarried daughters were not allowed to be in the company of the opposite sex. There had to be a group setting. They were kept in close seclusion. So Amnon is frustrated, to say the least. He has no opportunity here to make anything known to Tamar. So David's nephew, by the name of, where is it here in chapter 13? Jonadab, comes in with a wicked plot to have Amnon pretend he's sick, ask the king, David, his father, to have Tamar come and feed him. And this happens. Eventually, he forces himself on her. He rapes her. And she is disgraced and goes to her brother Absalom, another brother, not Amnon's full-blooded brother, but she is a brother or a sister to Absalom. He takes her in. He counsels her to be quiet, waiting for an opportune time for revenge. So this is what's happening here. And David, obviously, he hears about all this. How frustrated he must have been to see that something of his own nature, rottenness, got into the son's veins, and it's being carried out here. This was the whirlwind. This was the thing that Nathan the prophet said, trouble will continue to be in your home. The sword will be there. So Amnon is killed by Absalom. 2 years later, a sheep shearing festival, which David declines, Absalom gets Amnon to come to it and kills him in cold blood. He thinks he's innocent, that there's a right to all this, that it was not wrong for him to kill his half-brother. It says that later on. But we see that a lot of times, revenge just is not the way to go about it. Didn't Paul say in, I think it's in Romans, a quote from Isaiah, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord." So Absalom does this, and then he has to flee. He flees to Geshur, another country nearby, because he knows he's committed murder and he's wanted. He doesn't know how David's going to play this out, and so he flees. So now you've got Absalom in exile, Amnon dead, and David is in a turmoil about all of this. You've got internal factions here going on. Now, who is meant to be the successor? Solomon had been born previously, before all this took place, but he's still a child now. And you've got political intrigues that are stirring as well. David sees the need to strengthen his administration. Previously, he'd done a lot of composing the Psalms. Many of them were written in times of peace, not just in the fleeing from Saul, but other times when there was peace in the land. He is getting together with Jehoshaphat, who is the recorder. He's conducting the choir, all kinds of things he was doing. Now he's got to tighten the reins, circle the wagons. He sees all kinds of things taking place. He's also was involved in planning the temple, even though Solomon was the one who was going to build it. We got Bathsheba, his seventh wife? I've lost track. Growing in power and influence. They say together that Solomon should be the one to succeed David as king. Excuse me, I believe that's in 1 Chronicles 28. Possibly because of the death of one son, of another murderer in exile. So this is what's going on. However, Joab, that cunning and crafty general of the army, wants to get Absalom back, and he enlists the services of a woman who has the talents of an actress, and he puts words in her mouth to get her to go to David and concoct a story of her having two sons. One of them murders another one and then flees into exile. And David is listening to this story. At first, he doesn't see through it, but then he does. He says, "Is the hand of Joab not in all this?" The woman was saying, you could pardon a son that you don't even know, yet you won't pardon your own son, Absalom, to have him come back from banishment. So David's touched by the story, and then he decides, we'll bring Absalom back. At first, he was totally opposed to that because he sees he would be condoning murder. But then on the other hand, if he leaves Absalom in Geshur, he could be, basically involved in the worship of false gods and be tainted by all that. So he's got a dilemma here. What does he do? Joab is in the midst of all this, and he's told, bring him back, but don't let him see my face. A compromise. Anytime you compromise, you don't please pretty much anybody. Someone's always going to have a problem with your compromising. So Joab goes and gets him and brings him back, but he doesn't have any dealings with him. Absalom feels unappreciated. He doesn't like not being in the limelight here. What does he do? He sets Joab's barley field on fire. And we see here eventually, David says, I can't let him come back into the royal line here, meaning he's not going to become king, not even fellowship. He won't see my face. And Absalom is not happy with this at all. So what does he do? He goes out and he gains the favor and the good graces of the common people. He sits in the gate, and they come and they see him. He's a prince, if you will. And they tell him their problems. And he says, oh, if only I were king, I would help you, and all these kinds of things. He gains the favor and the security of a lot of people of Judah. Only Jerusalem is really loyal to King David at this time. So in Geshur, he was like a romantic figure, kind of like an illustrious exile. But now in Jerusalem, people that are loyal to David regard him with suspicion and mistrust. So we got Joab affecting the reconciliation, and we see David has lost his son. He didn't even show any affection for him whatsoever. He brought him back, but not in any kind of fellowship at all. So the first step of his rebellion, after gaining, support of people, is he goes out and he gets 50 men. It says this in chapter, is it 14? Yeah, 14, he's recalled. He goes out and he gets, actually it's 15, the beginning of 15, horses and men to run before him. That was kind of a symbol that he is going to come into power. The administration is going to be changed. And so with that, he is proclaiming himself to be king. And the horses and chariots were available to him because of his high birth and his personal charm. He's handsome. He is charming. All these things he uses to bring about a rebellion against David. I think at first he didn't want to slay his father. He probably wanted to see him as an honorable captive. But we also have a man that we introduce here by the name of Ahithophel. I think I might have mentioned him earlier. He's the grandfather of Bathsheba and probably the lead counselor of David's men. So Ahithophel might have been involved with Joab in the plotting to get Absalom back. And I think he was also embittered that David seduced his granddaughter, killed her husband, Uriah the Hittite, and he also is involved in this plotting and scheming to get rid of David. Ahithophel was a very brainy individual, cunning, very conniving, and we see possibly his influence being waned at the court, that it wasn't so much accepted anymore. David began to mistrust people after all these things that were going on, and we see that he removes himself from a lot of public affairs. So this is the whole setup in bringing about the rebellion of Absalom, who at this time thought he still had rights to become king. Joab is wanting Absalom, but then eventually he begins to see that Absalom is more ruthless than he is. And we have the whole thing here coming to a head in chapter 15. Ahithophel tells Absalom, go in and have sex with David's concubines. That will make him totally repulsive to you. I think it's in chapter, where is that here? I had it here a minute ago. Well, anyway, you'll find it. He goes in and goes into the concubines, and he becomes odious in the sight of David. There's no more opportunity for reconciliation here after that takes place. It's like he's saying, I am the king. They chase David out of Jerusalem. There is fire from both sides, from the north and from the south. Only Jerusalem's loyal, and that city would not have been given room enough for Joab to maneuver his army to deal with Absalom. So David has a plan, get out of Jerusalem so we can reorganize and see what we're going to do next. While he's leaving, a man named Shimei is cursing him, throwing stones at him. We'll read about him more later on. So this is what happens. David flees Jerusalem, and Absalom, after the incident with the concubines, begins to take plans for a total annihilation of David's men. Just before they leave, Ahithophel gives the advice. They're vulnerable, they're exhausted. Go in and overpower them and kill them. And I'll tell you what, if Ahithophel's advice was taken by Absalom, it would have changed the course of events. Israel's history probably would have been different. But what happens is a man named Hushai, who David, another counselor, David tells him, remain in Jerusalem to rebut the counsel of Ahithophel. And that's what he does. We see in chapter 17, Hushai is giving the exact opposite counsel of Ahithophel. He's saying, you know David's mighty men. They're like a bear robbed of their cubs. He's telling this to Absalom. I would delay. I would counsel for a delay so you can have all of Israel come together and you, Absalom, can go out and be the leader. And they say in chapter 17 and verse 14, Absalom and all the men of Israel said, the counsel of Hushai the Archite is better than the counsel of Ahithophel. And here's the reason it all happened. For the Lord had ordained to thwart the good counsel of Ahithophel, so that the Lord might bring calamity on Absalom. There's another case for sovereignty right there. So they delay. David's able to reinforce his army, gain strength, rest a little bit. And then the battle takes place in chapter 17 into 18. David says to Joab, "Be merciful, be gentle with the young man Absalom for my sake." They go out, they fight. It's in a forest setting, which Joab's men are more experienced. It says they knew every pathway, every tree of the forest. Absalom's men are not like that. Plus, Joab's men are fierce warriors. Absalom is kind of a ragtag army, even though they have more men. So what happens here? We have the whole thing coming together, and there's a battle. And sure enough, Absalom, as he begins to see some of his men getting killed, he flees, and a tree branch that he never even notices gets him around the neck, and he's thrown off his horse, and he's dangling there in the air. Joab comes along at the request of another one of David's soldiers who wouldn't even touch Absalom. And Joab takes 3 darts and thrusts them into Absalom's chest, heart area, and kills him. So that is how Absalom dies. With Ahithophel gone, the brains were gone from this revolt. And so he's going out on sheer emotion. And David never led the fight. In 18:3, the people said, "You should not go out, for if we indeed flee, they will not care about us. Even if half of us die, they will not care about us. But you are worth 10,000 of us. Therefore, now it is better that you be ready to help us from the city." So David doesn't go out in this battle. And the army is fortified, it's prepared, and they go out and they squash the rebellion. Absalom is killed, and we see David mourning over his son at the end of 18:33. After he's told Absalom is killed, he says, "My son, Absalom, would I have died instead of you, Absalom, my son, my son." Joab doesn't like this. We're going to talk about this next week. We're getting a little late here. So this is what happens. Another son dies, Absalom. The word of Nathan the prophet, the word of the Lord through him, definitely came to pass in David's later years. And, it doesn't pay. It doesn't pay in this sense for a lot of things, to be disobedient to the Lord, to try to usurp authority, which is what Absalom did. He might have become king eventually if he just didn't deal with Amnon, let David deal with it, although he didn't. A lot of things went wrong here. And David is seeing the whirlwind going through his own household and bringing him to a place of mourning, weeping. His physical powers are deteriorating. He's getting older. We'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. I believe he really aged prematurely the last 10 years of his life. And also his spiritual powers begin to wane as well. So that's the story of Absalom. And I think I covered everything I wanted to here. But, the thing is, David still had relationship with God, although he made many mistakes. A lot of people don't really focus in on some of these things. He obviously, the thing with Bathsheba was the big one, but there were other things he did, not disciplining his sons, various things that caused these kinds of heartaches and brokenness in his life. So we'll talk more about that in next week and in the weeks to come. In the meantime, have a great weekend. Enjoy the day. Get out there and get some sun today because it's not so humid. It's coming back tomorrow. All right. God bless.